All right, I'm joined today by Norman Beck. Norman, thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I don't know why you would have me, but I appreciate it.
Tell me about how you learn bridge.
So I was in college on a football scholarship, and I hated it. I hated football. I hated my players. I hated the coaches. I hated everything. And I was in the coffee shop, and I heard this old man played chess. And I went over and asked him if he wanted to play chess. And he said, "No, I like bridge much better." He said, "It's a faster, better game." And I kind of piqued my interest. And he said, "We're about to start. You want to watch?" And I said, "Yeah." So these four guys sat down, and coming from a kind of a gambling background in my family, I said, "What are y'all playing for?" And they said, "Oh, we're trying to win a rubber." And I thought, that's a weird thing for four grown men to be playing for. And about that time, a guy laid his hand down. I said, "Why is he showing everybody his hand?" And they said, "Oh, he's the dummy." And I thought, that's rude. And I watched for a while, and a guy said, "You want to read a book on it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he loaned me Goran's Basic Bridge. And 2 days later, somebody didn't show up, and I sat down to play. And within a week, I was pretty much hooked. And within 2 weeks, I was playing duplicate. So that's how I started.
Wow. And how did you meet Bob Hammond?
So I'm from Oklahoma originally, and I went home for the summer, and I started playing duplicate. And I learned about these fantastic players called Life Masters. And I would just get beat up, something awful. And I would ask 5 Life Masters, what should I have done? And I would get 6 different answers. Well, I was smart enough to know that that couldn't be right. So I changed my question. I asked who the best player was, because my thought process was, I find out who the best player is in Tulsa. I'll go talk to them, get them to play with me. And in a couple of weeks, I'll know everything there is to know about the game of bridge. So when I asked the Life Masters who the best player was, that was only one name. That was one person. And I said, "Well, what night does he play?" And they said, "Oh, he doesn't ever play." They said he has a nightclub. They didn't tell me he was a mafia bookie. They left that part out. So I go to this nightclub. I paid $20, which I didn't have, couldn't afford, to get a membership. And then they said, "You can't come in. You're wearing blue jeans." And so I went and put on slacks, and he wasn't there. And I came back 4 nights in a row. And on the fourth night, he was there. I walked up to this guy. His name was Byron Greenberg. I said, "I hear you're the best bridge player in Oklahoma. Is that true?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "I play a little. Did you want to play some rubber bridge for money?" I didn't even know you could gamble on bridge. I said, "No," I said, "I just want to know what it takes to be as good as you." And I remember he kind of looked me up and down. He gave me the advice that I followed from that day forward to this day. He said, "Play all you can play, read all you can read, always play with better players, and learn something every time you play." I said, "What else?" He said, "There is no what else." He said, "Now get the hell out of my club." So I was going to school in Durant, which is 90 miles from Dallas. And I learned that the best bridge player in the world lived in Dallas, Texas, a guy named Bob Hamman. I'm not going to say I stalked him, but I made it a point when I went to a tournament in Texas to get to meet him. And then when there would be a regional in Oklahoma and they would come, I would invite he and his girlfriend at the time, Patriot, to come out to my mom and dad's house, and my dad would barbecue. And so that's how I got to know him, initially. So that was my start.
And how did you end up working for him?
So I interviewed with him when I graduated from college, and he said, "Do something honest, like be a bookie." He was selling life insurance at the time. And so I moved back to Oklahoma, and I became a police officer, and then I left that and I became an insurance adjuster for State Farm. And Bob called me one day and said they had an opening for somebody to do claims and security for this weird insurance, and that was 33 years ago. So I quit my job with State Farm, and came down here and went to work for him. It was the best thing I ever did, because for 33 years I've worked literally 20 feet from one of the best players that's ever played the game. On the downside, for many years, I was the fourth worst player in my office. Now, most bridge players can't say they were fourth, but I was. It was because I had Bob Hamman, I had Bart Bramley, I had Haymont Law, and then it was me, a distant fourth. But I'm now moved up to second because Haymont and Bart have moved on. But being fourth in that group's not too bad a company.
So what did you learn about life from having Bob Hammond as a boss and mentor?
Well, I can't use the words that Bob has drilled into me, but basically you have to play the hand you're dealt. Doesn't matter what it is, how good, how bad. You have to play the hand that you're dealt. Early, before I went to work for Bob, I actually dated a woman who was a world champion. And I now have my significant other for 22 years is also a world champion. So I'm second best at my house. But when I dated her, I was a young player. And I said, what's it take to be a world champion? Because I wanted to know. She said, I'm not that good a player. Well, that's not true. She is. But she said, I'm a really good partner. And I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even understand. And she explained it to me that she builds fences around her partners and puts them in positions where they can't make a mistake. If she could signal with a 9 and instead of a 7, she's going to put down the 9. And I could understand that. So when I started playing, one of the things I learned early on was that one of the best ways to learn is play rubber bridge for more money than you can afford to lose. And you'll either do one of two things. You'll either go broke or you'll become a better player. So there was a underground club in Tulsa that where they had poker and dominoes and any card game you wanted. There was a guy named Ernie Busby who was called the Buzzard. That was his nickname. And I was playing rubber bridge for more money than I could afford to lose with a guy who was probably 45 and I'm 20. And I'll never forget this. I didn't even know Ernie. He was on my left. And I was in a 4-spade contract, and my spades were Queen 10 9 8 opposite Ace 7 deuce deuce. So I'm missing the king and the jack, and I have all the rest of the tricks. I just needed to not lose 2 spades, and so I led the queen out of my hand and went low, low, king. And later on, I got back on play, and I led the 10 and played low, and I played low, and I lost to the king jack doubleton on my right. And the guy I was playing with, who was a man, I was just really a boy. And he yelled at me, told me how stupid I was, how dumb I was, how bad a player I was. I shouldn't be in the game, that I was costing him money. I felt about 2 inches tall. I really felt bad. And I never will forget, Ernie looked at him, and the guy's name was Doug Bishop. He said, Doug, tell you what I'm going to do. He said, you pick out whoever you want in the room here. And he said, I'll take the kid. And he said, we'll play you a set match rubber bridge for whatever you can afford to play for. And I couldn't even afford to pay for the one hand I just lost. And the guy didn't take him up on the offer. He wouldn't take the bet. And so Arnie became my regular partner, and he was really my first mentor that I had. And one of the things we did was when we would go over every hand after a session, either one of us made a mistake, it cost $1. And we would take the $1 and it would go in a pot. And then when we would go to a bridge tournament, we would use that money to go out and have a nice meal. But it really drove home when you make a mistake on how to deal with it. You know, I play an awful lot of bridge now, and I have what I call the 3L rule with my students. And that is, when you make a mistake and something bad happens, you laugh about it, you learn from it, and you let it go, and you go on to the next hand. And it's to me, it's a very good thing to have happen. I've watched pro players my whole life and never thought I would ever turn pro or ever play bridge for money. But I've done it now for a couple of years and found out I really like it. And what I've noticed, so many, they are so rude and mean and cruel to people that are their bosses, that are paying them money. And that, to me, that's just wrong. You know, your partner makes a mistake and you get a 0. Well, you can't fix it. And if you yell at them and you tell them they were stupid and dumb, all that's going to happen is they're going to do it again. And now you got 2 zeros, and you can't. Pretty soon you're out of the game.
Yeah, that first L, laugh. Laugh about it. It's a mistake. We all make mistakes, right? I've never heard anyone put it quite that way, but I love it.
Yeah. First tournament I ever played in, the bidding went one club on my right, and I said double, and it went redouble on my left, and I'd never heard that before. It went pass, pass, and I asked what redouble was. They said, well, it shows 10 or more points. Well, I thought, well, I've got 13. The guy on my right's got 13. And 13, 13 is 26. The guy on my left's got 10. That's 36. My partner doesn't have anything. I better pass and not get in trouble here. And I let them play one club doubled and redoubled, and they made 5. Now, I've been playing bridge since 1977. I've defended one club doubled and redoubled one time because I laughed about it and I learned from it and I let it go. But I never forgot it. You know, you ask about knowing Bob. Bob, as great a player as Bob is, Bob may not be the best teacher. He's very difficult to learn from because he thinks so much faster than everybody else. But I was lucky enough to get to play a lot with Bart Bramley. And Bart's a great teacher. When you play with Bart, you go over the hands. You don't go over the hands. You go over every card on every hand by every player in the game. So an 18-board match playing with Bart often takes 2 hours. Well, and Bart is really good in that he will ask you, what is your plan? And you can't just say, well, I'm going to do this. He says, no, what's your plan? If you do this and they do that, what are you going to do? There's a painter that really had a quote that I think is very important for bridge players, and that is, painting is easy when you don't know how. Very difficult when you do. And most new players don't realize that. The ACBL, unfortunately, in my mind, creates a false sense of achievement with the master points. When I had 290 master points, I was almost a life master. I played with the guy who had given me the lessons, Byron Greenberg, the bookie. And we were seated at table 1, and we started against Barry Crane and John Fisher, and I thought, I've arrived. Not only did I not know anything, I didn't even suspect nothing. And before the game, he bet a $50 Nassau on the game, and I didn't even know that you could do that. Basically what that meant was he bet $50 on the first session, $50 on the second session, and $50 on the overall score. So he's bet $150 to a kid that had hitchhiked to the tournament and had to do a magic show to have enough money to be able to afford to eat. And so I was real nervous and played really bad, which is about the only way I knew how to play then. And after the game, he took me out in the hall, put me up against the wall, and told me never to ask him to play again. He said, you don't know how to play, and until you learn how to play, stay away from me at the bridge table, because I have to always gamble, and you don't know how. Now, a lot of people could have taken that advice and said he was just a curmudgeon and not a good guy. I took it to heart and worked on the game harder than I had ever worked on it, and do that to this day. And it was the best thing ever happened, even though at the time it hurt. The single biggest trait for people that want to get to be good is if they want to be good, they got to be passionate. You can't like bridge. You can't enjoy bridge. You can't wake up one day and say, oh, I think I want to become a bridge pro and play. It doesn't work that way. I think bridge chooses you. You don't choose bridge. And you got to be passionate. I've never met a single player that's really good, that's not totally passionate about the game. Completely passionate. One of the things I tell people too, I say, go to a bridge tournament, don't play. Go to a bridge tournament, find who the best player is, and go watch him play for a session. I remember one of the first times I ever did it, I was convinced Barry Crane. And he opened 2-0, and he had a singleton king. I thought, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And then when the dummy came down, there was Jack 5 of clubs. He won the first trick, and at trick 2, he laid down that king of clubs. And I went low, 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 and I thought, wow, that's magic. How did he know to do that? Now, one of the things that I still do, I keep a notebook. I carry a notebook all the time. If I'm at a table, in my pocket is a notebook. But with the advent of hand records and a cell phone, there's a better way. What I tell people to do, you have a bad hand, something happens. Take out your cell phone after the game. Go to the hand record, take a photograph of the hand, because now they get not only their hand, their partner's hand, the opponent's hand, and now when they want to discuss it with me, we can do it intelligently as opposed to saying, well, let's see, I had some clubs and I don't remember now Well, that's not good.
So what do you put in your notebook?
What I put in my notebook is when I have a hand that I don't know what to do, I don't know what the right bid is, or somebody makes a bid that's really different. If I play against somebody that they do something that I think is untoward or I'm really curious about, I'll write down what their name is, and so that I have like a database, if you will, so that if I play against Adam again, I know that he will open 5 spades to the 10 and first seat, not vulnerable, a week 2 bid. Something like that.
How much do you go back and reread and study that?
I do it a lot. And the way that I work, now that I work, we play a session. I say nothing during the session. After the game, I go home and I go over every hand and say, this is what you did right. This is what you did wrong. You may think you did something right here, but this was just a gift. It was Christmas. Because I think it gives people a false sense of achievement when the opponents do something entirely stupid. But then what I do is I go on the mistakes. I will point out on board 6, if we would have done the right thing, we would have gotten 8 match points instead of 4. And at the end of the session, I can show exactly how many match points we left on the table. And then after I send them the email, then the next day I call them on the phone and we talk about it. Another thing that I think from a professional standpoint that's really good is to point out, I made the mistake. This was where we got a bad score. It was my fault, not yours. I could have made it easier if I would have done this. I've known a lot of pros that won't do that their ego is such that they can't. They would rather twist it around and make it their students' fault. They have such insecurity that they don't want them to feel like that they've hired somebody that doesn't know. Well, let me tell you something. If you show me a player that says they always know, they're an idiot because they don't. Nobody, even Bob Hamman. Bob has a great line. Don't worry about the hard hands. Just don't mess up the easy ones. And there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think you can teach students declare play. I don't think you can do it. I think you can give them general concepts, but I think to teach declare play is almost impossible. I think working on defense is doable because you only have really 4 signals. You have count, attitude, suit preference, and alarm clock. What I try to do is when they're on defense is think about what you can't do before you try to figure out what you can do. Because if you figure out what I can't do this because if I do this, that will happen. The pie becomes smaller. But the problem that new players have, I think, is they want to learn all these new conventions. And what they don't realize is that hurts their game rather than helps it. And the reason it hurts their game is because they have a new convention. They don't know when to use it, where to use it, or more importantly, why to use it. Or they forget, or their partner forgets. You take somebody who just starting playing bridge and the first thing they do is try to learn the blue club. In my mind, that's wrong.
Absolutely. I tell my students, if you go into the club and, you're trying to get a good player to play with you, they're not going to look at the number of things on your card. They're going to watch you play a hand.
Right. Absolutely. And they'll know.
Yeah. Yeah. You take 2 really good players and you say you can play negative doubles and Blackwood, and that's it. They'll destroy you, right?
Yeah, that's okay. That's
So you've played with some of the best players in the world, Bob being at the top of the list. What are some of the things you've learned playing with all these different great players?
So, first time I ever played with Bob. Show you how dumb I was. We fill out the card and we get down to defense. And I said, so which signals you like? You like attitude, suit preference, or count? And he didn't flinch. He said, well, I use all 3. Well, that was a new concept for me in college. I mean, that was totally new. And I was like, well, how can you play all 3? He says, real simple. He said, as we're playing, he said, look at your hand and ask yourself, which one of the 3 you want to know. And he said, whichever one you wanted to know, that's what I gave you. And I said, how will you know what I need to know? And he said, I'll know. I mean, that was almost like Zen-like, but he was right. And now, 35 years later, I understand that. But at the time, I didn't. I've been really lucky that I've had some really, really good players that I've gotten to play with. And to me, I think there are several things that set the really good players apart from the rest of us. For one thing, they are extremely well disciplined in certain situations. They have 100% trust in their partner, 100%. If you don't cue bid, you don't have it, because if you would have had it, you would have cue bid. And when they're really good at that. The other thing that I think really good players excel at is dealing with really bad hands and really good hands. Most of us get along pretty well with the mediocre hands, but they're really good at the really good ones and the really bad ones. And being able to see when a hand that looks bad is really good, or see a hand that looks really good that's really bad. I can't stress enough how important it is, the discipline.
Have you felt like you learned different things from some of these different world-class partners?
Absolutely. The word focus bridge is something that I think is very important. You have to focus on the hand in front of you. You can't think about what you're going to do for dinner, what happened on the last hand, how cute the last person you played against was, how stupid your partner was. You have to focus. But focus is an acronym. F is for fight for the part score. One thing that really good players do, you don't get to play two hearts or two spades, ever. If you do, trumps are splitting badly on your left, almost always, because if it goes one spade pass, two spades pass, 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 and it's against a good pair, trumps are really bad and they're on your left because they balance always. So F is for fight for the part score. O is for over tricks matter. They're always looking for the over trick. Always. Count is the single most important thing that bridge players can learn. And most bridge players know how to count, but they won't count. They're too lazy. They don't understand that if you don't count at trick 1, at trick 9 when it matters, you won't get it. And the US stands for understand your system. Not know your system, but understand it. And there's a difference. To know your system is not any good. You have to understand it and know why partner did A and not B, or C and not D. That's the hardest thing. There was a book written in the 40s called Why You Lose at Bridge. I have a list of my 5 favorite bridge books, and that's one of them.
What are the other 4?
The other 4, actually it's now 6. The other ones are...
You added one of mine to the list. That's how you got to say.
Exactly. The Adam Parrish books on defense. Killing Defense by Kelsey. There was a book that Eddie Cantor wrote on defensive bridge player that was a big red book. That to me is really important. The Rodwell Files, and the best book that I've read on, How to Read Your Opponent's Card by Michael Lawrence, and the new book that Granovetter came out with that was the last book of Eddie Cantor. It's the best book on bridge I've ever read, and it's come out in the last 2 years. So anytime I think I know bridge or I understand bridge, all I do is go get Adventures in Card Play by Ottlick and read the first 2 pages, and I realize I don't know anything about the game.
You've played with all these great players. Do you have some who are kind of still mentors who like you
Absolutely.
go to? Like, what should I have done? What should this double mean? Like, who do you go to?
Well, I go to Alan Sontag, who's one of my dearest friends. I call Bart. I sometimes call Kit. Jeff Meckstroth is another one that I go to a lot. I mean, Jeff's really, really, really good partner. In fact, somebody asked me, they said, what's it like to play with Jeff? And I said, as long as you play perfect, he's great. That's not totally true. I mean, he's pretty understanding, but he's a really, really tough opponent.
What makes him such a tough opponent?
He's a big fan of the law, of the book that Larry Cohen wrote about following law. He's a big proponent of that. Some people are not. Now, thing about Jeff, if you're his opponent, you're never comfortable. You're never comfortable. And that's one of the things. He makes you make a decision at a level you don't want to make it at before you want to make it. It's kind of like log rolling. If you're on a log and you're trying to throw somebody off, you do it enough, you give them enough bad decisions, and they make the wrong one.
Is that a philosophy sort of thing? Is it just seeing things quickly before everyone else does?
Well, he and Alan both play very, very quickly, and they set the tempo of the game. Good players won't let them do that, but bad players fall into that and they play too quick. And well, when you play too quick, you make mistakes. I actually had that happen with me last week. We were second overall in an open pairs, and we should have been first because I let them make three on the last board when they should have only made two. I was playing against Ish, and he got me into the tempo, and I played too quick. It was my mistake, and I knew when I did it. He knew when I did it, and Jeff knew when I did it that I had done it. I messed up. I mean, I could try to sugarcoat it. And now, were there other places we could have picked up 4 match points in the 2 sessions? Yeah, but when it happens on the last board, it sort of drives it home.
How do you react to something like that? Like you're playing with Jeff Meckstroth, you had the thing on your racket, you let him down.
I'm sorry. Next board. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm sorry. Next board. When I said I'm sorry, he knew what I was sorry about. I knew what I was sorry about. There's no reason to dwell on it. We can't fix it. I see it happen all the time with bad players where they will yell at each other. Well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't if you play especially if you're playing a knockout match and that happens on the first board, you don't have to worry about it. You're going to beat them. If they go minus 800 when the hand's over, they fold the cards up and they put them away and neither one says anything to each other, be very, very nervous.
Is that something Hammond drilled into you?
Absolutely. Bob is the best in the world at that. Bob will drill it. Another thing that Bob has drilled into me, and he got this from Lou Math, never lead a trump when you're on defense, on opening lead. Never lead a trump. And I'm like, but Bob, sometimes it's right to lead a trump. He said, yes, but you're not smart enough to know when that is. Now, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but Bob is very reticent to lead trumps. If Bob leads a trump against you, it was the right lead. It's not like maybe 50-50, 60-40. It's going to be right because he's big on that. And one of the things that he's pointed out that I believe in doing is when you're declare and they do lead a trump against you, ask yourself, am I happy or sad? Most of the time, you're going to be happy.
Are there some other specific tips like that you've collected from these great partners over the years that you can share with us?
One big one is you need to be ready to play at board 1 and not be willing to stop until after board 26. I've seen it happen a lot of the time with players that they're not ready to play on the first round. They're not set in and they don't have their game face on. I want to say it was an Italian pair where in a big event on the last board, the dummy got up to go check the scores and caused his partner to renege or revoke or something. Anyway, cost them an event because he left before it was over and wasn't there to help his partner. It's really bad. There's a phrase that you may not be familiar with, most bridge players aren't, that comes from a cheating book on poker called Expert at the Card Table. And this is a book that teaches you how to deal off the bottom, deal seconds, do nefarious things that one shouldn't do. But one of the things that is in the book that is important to bridge players is the phrase uniformity of action. And what that means in the poker world is that if you deal off the bottom, it needs to be uniform and look the same as if you dealt off the top, because if it doesn't, it arouses suspicion with the other players. Well, that's a lesson that bridge players should take to heart. Uniformity of action is extremely important. Example, you pick up a hand, you pull it out of the box, and you open it up and say, complete Yarborough. There's not a face card in it, and you're in first seed. Before you even sort your cards, you say, I pass. That's bad. That's really bad. Because if you're playing against Jeff Meckstroth or Eric Rodwell or Alan Sontag, they notice that. Same way, if you're on defense and you make the lead and your partner wins it and immediately with no thought fires back an offsuit, it's a singleton. If they think for a long time It's a doubleton based on how they do it. If the bidding goes past and they think forever and bid one no trump, it's not a normal 15 or 16 point no trump. It's not. It's not normal, because if it was, it wouldn't have taken them so long. So the one that irritates me to no end is I open a club and the person on my left turns to my partner and says, "Do y'all play a short club?" Guess what? There's at least 5 or 6 clubs on my left every time. And they don't even realize they cheated, but they cheated.
You said that, one of the big things was coming to the table ready to play board one. What do you do to do that?
If you have somebody come to the table and they've got a book with them, they're easy. You're going to beat them. The only possible exception is Pam Granovetter. She reads some. I will give her a pass, but not anybody else. If they come to the table with a book, they're not there to play bridge. By the same token, if you sat down against somebody, "Hey, hi, Norman Beck, Dallas, Texas. You are?" I'm easy, because good bridge players, they don't do that. They're going to be courteous and they're going to be polite, but they are not going to be friendly. They're not there to find out who you are and where you're from. They're there to see if they can tear your head off. The other thing that if you sit down against somebody and they've got all these pre-alerts and you're not playing in the Reisinger or the Vanderbilt, we play this and this and this, and they have some weird convoluted system, I'm not too worried, because people don't play that. They just don't. But I'm always going to have a bridge books with me and stuff from like Bridge Worlds before I sit down to play. That I'm up in my room. I'm reading that before the start of the game, always. And I'm always going to get a good night's sleep. When I started playing, my first regular partner, we would go to a tournament. He would make Bloody Marys and screwdrivers for breakfast. He carried a flask of scotch in one boot and a flask of bourbon in the other. And by about the 4th round, we were drinking. I played the first 4 or 5 years. I thought you had to get drunk. I didn't know people ever played sober. I didn't understand. Now I don't drink at all.
Are there any other things while you're at a tournament that you do to keep yourself sharp to play at your best?
Well, I always go over every card, every hand with my partner afterwards, especially when if I'm working, I'm going to do it for sure. And if I'm playing with somebody who's better, well, here's one of the things that I think you're talking about teaching people. I think a student should have 3 parts. I think you should have somebody who is better than you. I think you should have somebody who's the same level as you. And I think you should have somebody who's not as good as you, because I think you learn from all 3. It's one thing to play the game, and it's another thing to teach someone to play. And they're not the same, and you have a better understanding when you're teaching someone than when you're doing it yourself. I could sum up in one sentence what it takes to be a really good player. One sentence, and that's it. It's easy to say and hard to do. Bid to the proper level and take all your tricks. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just bid to the proper level and take all your tricks. Boy, that's easy to say. Almost impossible to do. Well, it is impossible. I mean, you'll get it right most of the time, but you won't get it right 100%.
I'm just so interested in what differentiates, our students from us from Meckstroth, and how can you advance from one level to the next?
For me, I know that I get better whenever I play with somebody better than I am. And it's humbling, because I feel the same way when I'm playing with Jeff Meckstroth as one of my students does when they play with me. Because when the game's over, I know I made a mistake. But what's really humbling is when I made a mistake and I didn't know it. That's really humbling. When you make a mistake and you played as much as I have, and you didn't know that was a mistake. But it's good, because it opens your eyes. I mean, most people that play, "Hey, Adam, you want to play next Thursday night?" You say, "Yeah, well, let's do it." And we get together 15 minutes before the game and we fill out a card. So wrong. So wrong. Such a waste. You need to sit down and have lunch and talk about it more than for 15 minutes, because you're not going to know.
When you play with Meckstroth, what does the post-mortem look like? I assume, like you said, that there are mistakes that you don't notice that I assume he's pointing out, but he's not doing that in the moment, right? That's
No,
happening
no,
after
no.
the
After the
session.
game, we'll go over them. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've gotten to play with Jeff in 3 tournaments. I've played 15 events with him, and we have been first or second 13 of those 15 events. We were third once, so 14 of the 15 times we were first, second, or third. I mean, he's just a great player.
Does he treat this as a learning session? Like, does he treat you like a student?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've told him that I want him to. I got lucky when he went over 100,000 master points. I was lucky enough that I got to write the article about him for the ACBF. So I've known Jeff for a long time because working for Bob, for a long time, Bob was on the nickel team and Jeff and Eric were on the nickel team. And so I got to spend a lot of time in the nickel suite, not talking, but listening to them about the postmortem and seeing how they did it and seeing what was involved and what Eric Kokish did in regards to, at that high level, scouting reports, literally stacks 2, 3, 4 feet tall of this is the team we're going to play. This is how they play. This is what their tendencies are. This is what they do. People don't realize how much work goes into that kind of stuff. They really don't.
No one did it to the extent Kokish did.
No, Coach was great. He was one of my favorite people. He was really, really special. So I feel very humbled that I get to be around some of these people because I'm not as good as they are, but I love the game as much as they do. I have the passion. I was passionate the first day I played, and I'm more so today than I was day one. And you can't hide that. You can't hide that. Bridge is such a humbling game that I think a lot of people, they hire you. They don't really want to know. They want to know that they were good. They don't want to know, Norman, you miscounted board one. You had 11 tricks if you would discount it. They don't want to hear that. They think they do, but they don't. They don't want to know. I want to know.
Let's say I'm going to give you $1 million, and your goal is to get better at bridge. And you have to spend that $1 million on bridge. What do you do? Who do you hire? What does that practice look like?
I don't think that you can become a good bridge player with money. I don't think that money will do it. I don't think because you cannot pay somebody to practice. You could pay somebody to guide you, but you don't need $1 million. You don't even need $50,000. If you take the 5 books that I told you and you read them and you understand them and you practice what's in them, you'll be better than 90% of the people out there anyway. You will be able to beat everybody that you play with, and I just saved you $1 million. I think having a mentor is so important because there's so much that's not easily obtainable out of books. Because if you have a mentor, they can guide you and say, well, look, you should have known, and here's why you should have known. That's what you would be paying for. But you also, if you're going to do that, I think that the person you hire has to know and understand, hey, I'm really serious about this. And you can't hide that. They'll know.
Yeah.
They'll know based on your questions. When I started playing in Tulsa, there was a woman in Tulsa who was single, who was drop dead, gorgeous, good looking, unbelievable, single, love bridge. Nationals. She's arranged. She's going to play with a pro player in the morning game. And I'm pretty sure that they were really good friends. So game time. Pro's nowhere around. He's overslept. There's one old man in the room. Nobody else there. It's a morning game, 10 a.m. So she goes up to the old man. She said, pardon me, sir, but do you play bridge? If you couldn't spell bridge, you would have said yes. He looked at her and he said, well, I play a little. She explained to her what her problem was. She said, would you mind to start? He said, no, I'll be happy to. So she hands him his card, and it was very complex at the time. And he's agreeing to everything on the card with not any question. You play Bob? Yep. He's agreeing. This is a bad sign. It's very bad. Jacoby transfers had just come out. When they got to that, he didn't know what those were because they were brand new. And he asked her about them. She said, "Oh, it's brand new. Don't worry about it. We don't have to play it." He said, "Well, explain it. Just tell me what, explain." And so she does. And he said, "I'll try it." Once again, really bad. You got a brand new convention. This is not good. But she was too new at the game to realize her plight. So they sat down to play the first round, and she's nervous. Nothing bad happened. Played the second round. Nothing bad happened. Played the third round. Everything went fine. He seemed to take his tricks, and they didn't get in any trouble. Pro shows up. "Man, I am so sorry I'm late. I am so sorry I'm late." Old man looks up and says, "Ron, young man, we're having much too good a game for you to mess it up. Run along." The pro leaves. She said, "I'm sorry I never introduced myself." She said, "Nan Kerbel from Tulsa, Oklahoma." And he said, "Oswald Jacoby, Dallas, Texas." It's one of my all-time favorite stories because you never know who you're talking to. You never know.
So if I were going to try to find someone and pay them, what would be the traits you would look for if you were advising me of who to hire?
I would want somebody who was empathetic, that did not forget where they came from. I would think Eric Kokish would have been really good, when he was alive, because he was knowledgeable, he was kind, he was empathetic. Here's the other thing that I think is a problem. Bridge pros, the business, I don't think it's right to just take someone's money. If you hire a pro and after the game, they're off with their buddies drinking beer, you didn't get your money's worth. That wasn't what I think you pay for the time before and the time after. I don't think it ends when the last board's played. I just don't think that's the way it should be. And to me, as I know a lot about you as a player, not by how you play, but by the questions you ask. I can tell a lot by the questions you ask, because that will tell me, I think, if you have the aptitude. I think there's some people that will never be a good player. They'll never even be the least bit competitive. They may love the game, but they just don't. They don't have the card sense. They don't get it. But if they have the money, I don't think many pros are going to say, "Adam, this game's just not for you." They're not going to do that. I don't think.
All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled that you would even ask me, because there's a lot of people out there a lot better than me, but I've been lucky.
Yeah, you bring a very unique perspective, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So that's my 2 cents worth.
All right. Thanks, Norman.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.